Hey everyone, it's been a heck of a week here as we've seen the launch of DeepSeek causing sort of a Sputnik mania sweeping the industry and even reaching out to the mother-in-law factor, as I like to say, when people outside our industry are wondering what's happening. We've also seen a lot of other changes, including some really amazing, if you want to say that, announcements from the US government. Shutting down cybersecurity protections, among, well, lots and lots of other things. And wouldn't you know it, we picked this week for AI Field Day. So if you're wondering why we're all sitting together here in San Jose, we're going to talk about that a little bit too. You're watching Techstrong Gang. Hey everyone, I'm Stephen Foskett, not Alan Schimmel, and I am leading Techstrong Gang today and tomorrow live from San Jose, California. We are here for AI Field Day, which is a production of the Tech Field Day business unit of the Futurum Group. We're a sister company to Techstrong, so you've probably seen me on Techstrong Gang in the past. But we are joined today in person, live, by some of your favorite gang members, as well as a new gangster, Gina Rosenthal. Gina is a very good friend of mine, somebody I have admired for a long time. And if you asked me who should we bring onto the Techstrong Gang, I think Gina would have been the top of my list. So, wow. Gina, welcome to the gang.
Thank you. Now, okay, that means I have free reign to just go crazy. I'm excited.
So tell us a little bit more about yourself.
About myself, well, I am Gina Rosenthal, also Minx, long story. I am living in Austin. I have a product marketing agency where I do anything product marketing for technical B2B vendors. But the story of AI is really important to me. I'm very interested in, I'm interested in technically how it works because some of that is pretty amazing. I'm more interested in how it affects people, how it impacts our language, how it impacts society. So I kind of have a different take to it.
Yeah, and that's the reason that I think that you bring such an incredible perspective to these conversations, because time and time again, you're a technologist who brings the human perspective into these things. And we can always count on you doing that at Field Day. We can always count on you doing that on our podcasts. And now, of course, here on the gang. We are also joined by some familiar faces here on Techstrong Gang this week. John Willis.
Hey, it's great to be here. Yeah, excited.
Thank you for joining us here in San Jose, as well as on Techstrong Gang. And then finally, John Swartz, a very familiar gang member.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to my hometown, San Jose. I was born and raised in San Jose, and I'm excited to be part of Tech Field Day. I have heard a lot about it, and now it's time to experience it.
Excellent. Well, let's kick things off. Before we get into the heady and weighty news, let's kick things off with just an introduction to what's going on and why we're here at AI Field Day. So AI Field Day is one of the Tech Field Day events that I produce with the Tech Field Day crew. Now, I've been doing this for 15 years. It's been my full-time job that whole time, and it is such an amazing thing that I've been able to have this be my job. Essentially, I bring a dozen independent technical people together in some place, typically the Bay Area, but sometimes other places, and then companies come to us and present. We also have industry organizations present. We present to each other. We record podcasts. We record roundtable discussions, et cetera, over a couple of days. All of these sessions are live streamed on Techstrong TV, along with the Techstrong websites, as well as, of course, the Gestalt IT channels, which is the legacy Tech Field Day news site that's going to be folded soon into the Techstrong family of websites, and, of course, techfieldday.com and on LinkedIn. So if you go to techfieldday.com, you'll see an archive of this event stretching back literally to 2009, including video recordings of presentations from companies that, well, came and went during the time. Gina, you've been with me from the very start. Gina was actually there for Tech Field Day #2 in 2010. You've seen this thing change. Tell us, tell our audience a little bit, why would they care about Tech Field Day? What is it for them?
I think one of the things that's interesting about Tech Field Day is the way you created it. You know, at a time when we were we're all bloggers, and we were all just trying to get the news out, and nobody would talk to us because we weren't analysts, we weren't media. We were just bloggers. Who are those crazy people? But if I'm right, you created it to have a way to get right to the companies, so the companies could talk to the bloggers and tell them exactly about their products. But at the same time, you have these independent analysts being able to push back on what the company was saying, which is why I loved it, because I was a blogger and a vendor, so I loved hearing those tough questions about how things work. So if you're looking to figure out, for example, we have VMware today, they're going to talk to us about their AI offerings, and we'll definitely ask them the hard questions about, how is VMware really doing AI, or is it really AI? And I think that's important to know the reality versus the hype.
Yeah, and that really was the goal, was to democratize it. I mean, the 2000s and early 2010s, that was a time of democratization of communication. Certainly there's a place for analysts and traditional press.
Yeah, I was going to mention that. Something. It's interesting what you said, Gina, because I was on the opposite side, and I would be at these hermetically sealed events where I would have a controlled message feed into my head. Microsoft, hello, Microsoft. And this would go on. There was really no give and take. There were some questions, but they were parried away usually, or we didn't have access to the executives themselves. And the kind of tough exchanges that you really want to have, that you only can have one-on-one after the press conference, they never took place usually in front of everyone. So It was an extreme. So I'm looking forward to the other side and being kind of on the inside.
Welcome to the dark side.
Yes, or enlightened, really.
For me,
perhaps.
Just for me, I started a network. I created a company in 2014 that did SDN for Docker, and one of the gentlemen on my co-founders was Brent Salisbury. And I knew very little about. I knew sysadmin networking. I didn't know real networking, like Maduka Venkapali, and those were my partners. And like Field Day was like this thing, like wow, all these brilliant networking people. And over the years, I'd watch the shows. I watched Jerry Solomon, who's another one of my heroes, at one of the earlier network Field Days. And I think when you called me finally, I said jokingly, I feel like I've got my picture on the cover of the Rolling Stone.
Well, honestly, what I said to myself is what took me so long.
Yeah, there you go.
I've been working with John longer than Tech Field Day, for sure. I think that we met, in the early 2000s.
Nonsense Cloudorati stuff.
Yeah, the
right?
Cloudorati and
wow.
Cloud Camp and all that.
Yeah, Cloud Camp, yeah.
And it was interesting because that was, I think, the dawn of some of the democratization of enterprise tech coverage and knowledge sharing. And so much of that has blossomed in the 2020s now, to the extent that I think that the majority of people watching this, if you're an IT practitioner, if you're an IT manager, even if you're a CIO, your first source of information is not through some hermetically sealed channel, whether it's analysts or media. Mm-hmm. It's through Googling something, watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts. It's all come to fruition to the point that traditional media and analysts have also gotten on the train. And, we now I brought Tech Field Day into Futurum. The reason I did that is because Futurum is making a bold bet that the whole paywalled analyst thing isn't going to win.
That's something I talked about so Daniel, I used to run into Daniel all the time at events. I would always reach out to him for comments because I liked his insight. And he told me about this model and how it was evolving, which got me interested in joining eventually. It's something, there was that major wall between the two sides. And we can do both. And it will be interesting to see, as we work together, and especially, I'm going to be doing more stuff with Mitch, for instance, and
who's also here with us.
Who's also going to be here tomorrow, Olivier Blanchard, who covers devices. We're going to be doing more of this mixture. And I think it's good. It kind of brings out the best in both sides rather than one side preaching to the other.
Yeah.
So I think also we're at this point again where we have so much talk about an emerging technology, and it's being driven by just extreme wishfulness of what the technology is going to be. And there's so many technical questions, but the hype is so much that it's very hard to wind it back down and talk about, okay, this is a computer science evolution. So why aren't we talking about this as engineers? Why aren't we talking about how this actually works? And then why aren't we talking about how it's going to impact businesses and ultimately people? And I think that was happening at the time, back when we had the social media revolution, was what kicked it all off, was the communications revolution. And you needed something to ground us in reality and use this for good. And, you know, it is good to have the press and the discipline of journalism and blogging brought together, because then you don't get the crazy, you know, diatribes that, you know, you're disciplined about it. You get that mixture and it's perfect.
Yeah, we fell into, I mean, I would fall into the trap, and I think my peers would, where we would instantly go to the rent-a-quote person. There was the one analyst.
Yeah.
There was like a handful of them.
I think we know some of those people.
Yes, yes, hitting a little. But I'll mention one by name who's not part of our ecosystem. There's a guy at Syracuse named Robert Thompson. He was the most quoted guy anywhere. But he could come up with a pithy comment about culture. New York Times consistently quoted this guy to the point where it was almost a one-man industry, and he monetized it. And eventually there was a pullback on over-quoting him, because it was, in a sense, self-serving, building into his brand and his base. And I still think that exists. I want to think it doesn't exist as much. I think I see new, fresher names. And I also think not just the analysts, but the people who cover this stuff have kind of progressed and gotten better at cutting through the BS, if you will.
Well, I think the openness, like you talked about the democratization, right? At the same time that was going on, there was Gene Kim, and we created what we called the Cambrian explosion of technology, where, you know, you had cloud, you had social media, and you had DevOps all happening around that same time. And from a technology place, there again, you didn't have to go to the Gartner. People could sort of read the books, the publications, the things we were talking about that were somewhere between pure tech and the CIO.
And there is some pure tech. We have to kind of move on, I think, to the important stories of the week. I do want to mention that, as Gina mentioned, you know, we're going to hear from VMware. They're going to talk about how they're going to be privatizing AI. Check out Techstrong Gang tomorrow for a deeper coverage of all of these sessions. We're also hearing from Memverge, which is a frequent field day company. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with them, but essentially their magic trick is snapshotting and cloning memory. And they can do this to migrate live running servers. They can also do this, as you can imagine, in AI training situations. They can snapshot and clone and propagate running instances of training systems and roll back if there's a failure, that sort of thing. It's pretty cool stuff. Kamawaza is essentially a service provider to the gods in terms of really bringing incredible AI solutions to the enterprise. They really rocked us at AI Field Day last year at this time. We're also bringing in industry groups. So we've got ML Commons coming in this morning. They're going to be talking about what they're doing on the client side and with their storage benchmarks. David Cantor is a great friend of all of us, I think, and a great friend of the show. And finally, we're going to hear some more from the Futurum Group, which recently did a survey that you may have heard about here on the Gang of CEOs. So we're going to get a deeper look into some of the data from that survey. So all of that is going to be live streamed. Actually, by the time you're watching that, it had been live streamed on Techstrong TV on Wednesday, and we're going to be live streaming again Thursday. All of these sessions will also be streamed again on Techstrong TV and posted to the Tech Field Day YouTube channel. Let's take a break for a moment, and then we'll get right back in with DeepSeek and the undermining of the U.S. government for fun, I guess. You're watching Techstrong Gang.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Welcome back, everybody. We are living in a week As John Willis said to me last week, there may not have been a week that has produced so much impactful tech news as this one. And here we are together in San Jose to discuss it. The week isn't just about DeepSeek. A lot of the actions of the incoming U.S. government administration are really impactful on tech and on the world and the future of, well, everything we're doing here. We're going to talk about that in the third segment. For this segment, I want to push back a little bit on this DeepSeek mania. How many of us have heard already that this is a Sputnik moment? This is the moment that the entire world learns about the promise of AI, that the whole AI table is upturned, that everything changes. Well, although DeepSeek did achieve something pretty impressive, I'm not sure it's a Sputnik moment. So, John, let me turn it over to you. Jump in. Is this a Sputnik moment?
I don't think so. I mean, what I said to you, I think Monday was probably, in my 40 years of doing this craziness, I've never seen one day be so explosive and so much hype and reality. I mean, the most interesting thing about DeepSeek narrative is the glass is like maybe a little less than half full and a little. I mean, there's some interesting tech that came out of discussion. And so the geeks of the world are like fascinated, and rightfully so. The hype, and I think you expressed, and I think you all can express more about some of the stuff that probably wasn't real, about how many GPUs they used, did they actually have, all that. So there was like crazy hype. And I think the thing that scared me the most yesterday as I was trying to keep up on LinkedIn is I was watching security experts engage and just tell people to go to an API that's hosted in Hangzhou, China, right? And in the actual, I didn't do it, right? In their license, in their agreement, it said exactly what they were going to do with your data. And so I think probably when it's all accounted, there's no scientific data from my point, but there'll be millions of people that expose critical information. Mm-hmm. And then one last thing, the models themselves. There's a lot of fraud in the data sources of models. We've learned a lot about how you can create inference injections, analytical exploits through the data itself. So I think even the ones that were a little cautious that said, oh, just don't do the API, but go ahead and load the model. And by the way, you know who had models that were not built from scratch on Monday? Amazon. The DeepSeek models, they were running in Bedrock and Amazon and Google. And again, probably safer than going out to an API. But like, I wanted to just hear from the experts over the next couple of days, the people that really understand how to dissect this. And so I thought yesterday was just crazy. And again, it was half full because I do believe the open source and what was contributed and what we learned of how you can do it with somewhat limited resources was an amazing opportunity for compute, network, and storage. Yeah.
I was going to say, sorry, Stephen. There's kind of this demystification of DeepSeek that's been going on, especially in the last 24 hours. So there's a report out from Bloomberg that Microsoft and OpenAI are investigating whether data output from OpenAI's technology was illegally obtained by a group linked to DeepSeek. Microsoft's been looking at this since the fall. So they believe these individuals linked to DeepSeek, and I have to be precise about this, were exfiltrating a large amount of data using OpenAI's API. So there's that.
My. Can we just pause on that for a second?
I know where we're going.
Isn't that hilarious? How dare they? Okay, go ahead.
Okay, here's the next data point. Because, and again, this is a little bit of self-preservation by Silicon Valley, right? Out of fear, they're kind of pushing back, but there's also a reality set. Because, as we all know, hype goes from one extreme to another very quickly, especially in the AI age where everything's accelerated. So then we have David Sachs saying there is substantial evidence that DeepSeek used OpenAI models to train its own. And then Semi-Analysis said there's proof that DeepSeek spent more than $500 million on GPUs over the course of its history. And then we have our own Daniel Newman, our CEO, who brings this point up. And I know John probably wants to push back maybe on this. He said that when did we decide that we're going to just believe a paper that comes out of China? He thinks that it's not unlike China to potentially try and play a little bit of psyops with Americans and the markets to see how we would react. So there's all this going on. it was inevitable, and also when I heard about DeepSeek, it sounded too fantastical to me. It just is my sixth sense going off. So I'm expecting to hear more of this. Now, I'm not dismissing completely what they did, as John said. I think they built models that potentially are fantastic. So
the tech is real.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
just to quickly, I mean, we talked about this, Steve, last night. Just quantization. We've talked on Techstrong about quantization going from 32-bit floating points. Like there's this laziness that happened in sort of general Gen AI, which was like we have all the GPUs. Let's choose. Just using strategic or analytically when to use like 8-bit floating point versus 8. That makes a world. There's papers before DeepSeek. The other thing I wanted to go to your point, which is really interesting. There's an article just today about somebody who created a virus because Anthropic and probably OpenAI have been ignoring robots.txt. And robots.txt is the description that you're supposed to honor to not to gather the data or so like you're right. There's so much hypocrisy here.
The other thing too is a lot of these companies are pushing back because these same companies have been boasting about how much money they're spending and they're throwing into AI. So Microsoft has a corporate blog where they talk about, we spent $80 billion. In hindsight, that probably wasn't the smartest thing to do. Meanwhile, there's a story out of the New York Times that Meta's going to spend $65 billion.
And of course, there's the big story that supposedly the Stargate thing is going to be $500 billion.
Oh, we talked about that. That's all smoke and mirrors. By the way, that's one thing I totally agree with Elon Musk about. There is very little money there, and that's kind of a counterport. It was interesting to have the bookends of Stargate, extravagant spending, data center expansion.
That's right. Yeah, totally.
And then only $5.6 million. We just put it all together.
But
and let me just inject a little bit of facts into the DeepSeek discussion. Sure. Okay, and so first off, I want to call attention to everybody's. So Stratechery, Ben Thompson wrote an incredible FAQ about DeepSeek. The tech is real. The group seems genuinely honest about what they did. And if you read their paper, which is not a scientific paper, but is a paper describing what they did, they're pretty detailed about exactly how they achieved this. Right there in the paper, it says these costs, this $5.576 million, include only the official training of the one model, DeepSeek V3, excluding the costs associated with prior research and experiments and architectures and data. In other words, the magic that they're claiming to have achieved is essentially being able to train this model on H800, which are the export limited GPUs with limited memory bandwidth, and only a certain number of them and the amount of time that it took them. And they go into great detail about how they achieved this. It's a mixture of experts model, which means that it's a combination of lots of small models that make a big one. That's going to take less time to train. It has less parameters. It's also, as you said, a quantized model. And it was also based on previous work that they had done over the last year. And of course, it's also based on every bit of work that's been done in the AI industry to date. So even if you do take it at face value, it's not quite the amazing, Sputnik moment that people are taking it for. Gina?
I think the other thing we have to start talking about is the data that it was trained on. Number one, I'm looking at a post on LinkedIn from Timnit Gebru, who is the woman who got fired from Google, the ethicist that got fired from Google. But she mentions for it to be open source, we have to know what data it was trained on and evaluated on, the code, the model architecture, and the model weights, which of course I think everybody's focused on. Open source is the model weights. Talking about the data in that paper, they talk about how that data is synthesized from other generative AI programs that they worked with. Let's also talk about where this is coming from. This is coming from China, which is controlled by a communist country, which means the content and the information is controlled. So already we know that this model doesn't know anything about Tiananmen Square. We don't know what else that is. So
actually, a friend of mine did ask about Tiananmen Square, and there was
nothing.
Yeah,
It's a scenic square in the heart of the city.
We don't know.
We don't know anything about this.
We don't know what it is, but that's part of the thing. We're talking about a model that does generative AI. Generative AI depends on the data coming in, and whatever it does from the data coming in, that's what you're allowed to build from. Now, we might be able to make it goes faster. More people will be able to use Gen AI. Maybe you can train it with some RAG or your own specific things. But what happens even if you tell it, no, let's teach you about Tiananmen Square? What will happen?
But that's the meta point there you just brought out, which is brilliant, which is there's two differences. There's their API, no. Their out-of-the-box models, which are built. Or Ruben Cohen did this on the Quen models. There are a lot of uses of Quen models. He wrote some great stuff like a month or two ago about all the inference fragility. And one of the things they found is the more constraints, like them blocking, actually makes the model weaker in general. The more constraints you build in, and those constraints are built into the data sources that are trained. The thing that is glass half full is if you can dissect all the technology it takes to build those. Use your own synthetic engines to build your own data without the constraints. Then you might have something really interesting. I think that's like taking their models at face value and throwing up into SAS, you're going to have all these inference issues,
right,
which are going to create constraints. Constraints create constraints. But the interesting thing about what happened in this paper is if all these technologies pan out to play out the way they described, and you build your own models using that technology, that is the thing I think that scared the heck out of Wall Street.
May I add a cynical note? This is the week where Microsoft and Meta are going to announce their results. And I can bet your bottom dollar that they are going to be inundated with questions about, you've spent X amount of money, like, hey, Meta, you pursued the metaverse and that kind of exploded on you. Now you're doing this again. And how do you explain this company, DeepSeek, and where's your monetization plan? The pressure has really been intensifying the last couple of quarters among the analysts for any type of proof of return on investment. And so, again, it's a very impatient culture, especially Wall Street, which is an unrealistic culture.
Yes.
And this just raises the ante and creates craziness.
So and let's wrap this up. One point that I want to add onto that is, ironically, Meta and Microsoft are two of the companies that are best positioned to benefit from the DeepSeek moment. Because if there's any validity at all into DeepSeek's technical achievements, and I think there is,
I agree,
then Microsoft and Meta are about to get bigger, better models that perform much, much better on much lower hardware with much lower resources in terms of operating resources, but also in terms of capital resources. And that's how AI has proceeded to date, and that is how AI will continue to proceed. As Satya Nadella said, Jivan's paradox, right?
Yes,
just going to say Devon's paradox.
As AI gets more efficient and accessible, we'll see more use of it. And that's what's going to happen here. Microsoft and Meta are going to have AI everywhere. And thanks to this development that came from DeepSeek, but also from literally the entire AI industry, because everything DeepSeek is doing is something that researchers have been working on for a while. They just did it. And that's going to benefit the entire
demand.
industry.
And that's terrifying because go back to the data. And this will come from closed systems. How do we know that that data is appropriate is fair to the whole world?
And it's a big question. We're going to be talking about DeepSeek, the DeepSeek moment for a while. And I think that what this will do is it will only accelerate AI. It will not hold it back. So let's move on here for a moment, though. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Techstrong Gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
So welcome back to the Techstrong Gang. We are now turning the page a little bit on DeepSeek mania, and we're going to talk about what's been going on in Washington, D.C. Now, this is not a political show. If you've watched, sometimes it does sound a little political with some people. But it is undeniable that what's been coming out of Washington has been, let's say, earth-shaking in terms of the executive orders that, for example, have paused all disbursements of money to basically, well, literally everything, including, oops, accidentally Medicaid. Also, the dismantling of federal organizations, the reassignment of leaders across the Justice Department, across most other departments as well, the loss of institutional knowledge. Boy, this could not have happened at a worse week in terms of the global impact of all this DeepSeek nonsense. John, you wrote an article about the changes at the CISA and so on. Talk to us a little bit about what's going on in cybersecurity.
You know, Monday morning, I had known about DeepSeek. In fact, me as being terrible at marketing, I probably could use your help. I did a podcast with a good friend of mine who is incredibly deep into all things training models, AI, and we have 2 podcasts queued that will come out next week where we talked about DeepSeek the prior week, where we talked about the architecture, how it's different, 01, 02. So I've been familiar with it. So, but on Monday morning, when the storm started, I started thinking about what happened the prior week. Right, this is before Monday, right? This is even before what happened sort of yesterday, which was, and I don't like to be a Chicken Little person, but if you think about this, I wrote, could a perfect storm be building in the deep? Trying to be clever, right? But like CISA has been reasonably dismantled. Jen Eastley has been pushed out. You could say she resigned or whatever. The bigger thing is this CSRB. The CSRB, it's called the Cyber Safety Review Board. They're the ones that have been tracking Salt Typhoon. If you know what Salt Typhoon, it is a notorious group of Chinese actors that are infiltrating our telecom infrastructure at alarming rates. That whole board, 18 members, experts, some of the top cyber people in the world, volunteering their time, have been dismantled. There's cuts in CISA. There's cuts in CISA, part of DHS. Even in the Department of State has put a freeze on cyber money going to different diplomats. Like all this happened last week. So you couldn't. I was telling you last night. I wish I could have wrote a Tom Clancy novel at the end of last year about this perfect storm of all this stuff happening. It happens in every presidential transformation, right? This is not. Some of this is uncommon. Some of this is common. Some of it's uncommon. Yeah. And then talk about this unbelievable, monstrous new AI thing just flooding where millions of people are downloading it. I don't think you could have wrote a believable, fictional story.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you mentioned, it's funny, there was Salt Typhoon and there was another typhoon, I can't remember the name. But one of the things that reassured me was CISA and Jen Easterly. I mean, that was one of the organizations that I thought, okay, they know what they're doing. They're working in hand with the government and the private enterprise. That gives me hope. And then this, the bottom's gone.
A good friend of mine worked for her, and he didn't have great things to say. And I've been tracking her for last couple of years. I think she's done an incredible
incredible
job. And what they've done at CISA, and all that just gone. Like, wait a minute, let's freeze. Let's see what we can learn from them. And I think there's this incredible convergence of a gap that is really scary between the technology underlay of what's happening with AI and what's going on with the cyber. One other thing I would say, and I will shut up. One of the big questions I got most yesterday, which was, would you be complaining about this if it came from Switzerland? I'm like, yeah, but that's not the point. Mm-hmm. It's China. And there are some bad actors trying to take out our water supply, our telecom.
Right.
And, so asking me that question as if I'm some bias against, I've been tracking cyber infrastructure for the last 2 years, and it's scary.
I would be channeling my Alan Schimmel, but I won't do it. I won't do it because, but I want to say, this is something that goes beyond tech. It's the institutional knowledge and the disparagement of it, or the total disrespect for it, which is going to affect all of us in many different ways, not just through technology. So this is just part of a larger problem, and I won't go any deeper than that, but I just think it needs to be said.
Well, it's not like they didn't tell us what they were going to do for 3 years.
Exactly,
We knew this was coming. But I think the thing, maybe the reason say things about it, we call it cyber, and people our age thought cyber was something different 30 years ago, right? So I will never get over calling this cyber. And then the second thing is everything is digital. Everything we do is digital. The water supply, everything is run by computers. And because of that, and because even before now, where they've decided not to fund anything for some reason, everything was critically underfunded, where they couldn't update things. So it was easy to find things to hack into and crack open and make disruptions. I mean, I went to one time at DEF CON, I saw the most awesome presentation about how to take over a country. And he had like this video where he took these chainsaws and put them together on a drone, and you could just go and cut the power lines and all of these things you can do. This is not.
Yeah, I mean, years ago, we went to some hearing, a meeting of government officials, and they talked about asymmetrical warfare and how they were testing how to cut off the water supply in Iraq.
This is what it is, and it's state sponsored. We do it too.
We do it too.
It's exactly what is done, and so it's not about we're against China or against Asia, but China is a foreign adversary, and they are going to do this.
And just so my friend Josh Corman, who's built this thing called Undisrupt 2027, and he's just getting very simple. That like literally bad actors, and again probably from China, could take out a water supply in a major city for 2 weeks because the infrastructure is so old. And if in 2 weeks a city doesn't have water, there'll be millions of deaths.
Yeah.
Right, like that. It's that simple. It doesn't have to be some grand scheme on a big board about how you take out a whole country. You literally just got to go to Des Moines, Iowa, and take out the critical 40, 50-year-old infrastructure, and dismantle it.
Well, I want to personally apologize to the people of Des Moines, Iowa, who we have just thrown.
I have nothing to do it. But read Josh's.
But also think about autonomous vehicles and like how we're going to want to set up this utopian idea of cars moving and flowing and you can disrupt that.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you want to disrupt the country. Most vehicles. There's a story that came out this week as well about Subaru and how connected their cars are. And you don't think of Subaru as a leading edge technology company with autonomous driving. No, they don't have any of that. Their cars had a flaw that would allow all the Subarus to be stopped where they are. You want to disrupt a country? Stop all the Subarus.
Maybe it's not.
Again, I apologize to Des Moines Subaru dealership.
That's a good one. And it doesn't have to be the cars.
Yeah.
What if you disrupt the trucks?
Yeah.
Then you don't have medicine. You don't have food.
Supply
you don't have
that. We could go down that road too.
Right. So this is not. And so it's fine that you connect to an API of a new model that was trained in China that doesn't recognize Tiananmen Square anymore. Totally fine.
Yeah. So here's the problem, and to me, again, without getting too political, you don't have to be political to say why didn't somebody think this through.
That's right.
You don't have to be political to look at, for example, the freezing of all Medicaid spending and the shutdown of all the Medicaid disbursements in the United States, which literally happened yesterday, to say, wait, maybe somebody should have considered the impact of ordering all funding to be frozen. And you don't have to think about, I think that the federal government, I think that even the Trump administration would be pro CISA's goals. I think that they would be supportive of what CISA is doing if only they took 5 minutes to think about it.
It's a good thing the bros are in his corner. I mean, this is like the absurdity of it all to me.
Totally.
Look, he's surrounded by these people who should know better, but they're too busy
doesn't
pursuing
care.
their greedy
Doesn't
self-interest.
That was my point yesterday. It seemed like the people that should have knew better. I am not that smart. I listen to really smart people, and I try to grok, and I try to teach. I always say they're the unicorns and the horses. I'm a horse that tries to understand unicorns to explain to other horses, right? And yesterday just seemed like the unicorns were failing us. They really were just going off on these tangents about how great DeepSeek was. And I get it. Everybody was trying to get their social branding out. I'm the first person. And we all were kind of doing a little of that. But I was just having this tug of war with people accusing me of being anti-this or anti-open source. And really what I was just saying is, can we all just calm down and figure this thing out before millions of downloads happen? And it just wasn't happening yesterday. And then you add the fact that all this stuff that happened last week, and even in the Medicaid thing got all the press, but there was like a $300 million DHS grant for cyber that was canceled as part of yesterday's That's not even counting the executive order stuff from last week.
And it gets worse. I mean, all of the inspectors general for all of
That's
the
crazy.
branches were fired. Again, these are people whose job is to root out fraud and abuse and overspending and so on, and they're all gone too.
Well,
I'm sorry to do this, but we do have to wrap up. Gina, I'm going to give you the last word.
I was going to talk about the Office of Personnel Management.
Yes.
It's just such, it's very much from reports that being run by Elon's hench people. And the fact that they went in and set up an on-premises Exchange server and expected people that they have trained very well not to click on links from suspicious-looking emails. Like, what are they? They're not thinking. They don't care. This is the equivalent of Musk going into a data center and pulling the plug. Nothing happened. It's fine.
That's right.
It's the exact same thing. They do not care. They are not going to look at what they're hurting. They're not going to do it unless enough people push back and protect the people that will be the most vulnerable and most impacted by this, because they don't care to know.
And
They
that's
don't care.
And
that's a
you said this,
problem.
but Gina, you said this earlier. We're not acting like engineers.
No.
And that's the thing that sort of really is to all these points. We're not acting like engineers.
Well, we have to wrap up for today. Thank you for joining us on the gang today. Gina, welcome to the
Thank you.
crew.
This was
I think
fun.
that you acquitted yourself admirably.
She's going to be a regular.
Yeah.
We're going to bring you in. We're going to bring you in.
I vote Fridays.
So we
fine.
we are going to be live streaming Tech Field Day on LinkedIn as well as on the Techstrong websites. We're talking about AI. We're learning about AI. We're going to have some private conversations. We're going to hear from organizations like ML Commons. All of that is going to be live Wednesday and Thursday. So by the time you watch this episode, it will have been live all day Wednesday. Go to LinkedIn. Go to the Tech Field Day page on LinkedIn, and you will be able to watch all of these presentations and our discussions and everything from Wednesday right now. So go look at that, and then we will be back with another episode of Techstrong Gang recorded live right here in San Jose tomorrow morning as well. So keep an eye out for that. We're going to shift up the guests because I don't like any of these people. We'll keep Gina.
I'm coming.
There you go.
We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of Techstrong Gang. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.